It again. Hello.
Hey, we're live. We're going.
Hi.
Sorry, you said wait a second after
I didn't know what was going on. I was finishing a text on my phone.
All right. Well, we are here. We are live. Welcome into a brand new edition of the Sports Hub Patriots Podcast. Alex Barth, Matt Dolloff from 985thesportshub.com.
Cut that part out when you edit it, Barth.
That's the plan. Back after a week off last week with the holiday. We didn't get a chance to react to the blowout loss to the Chargers. Turned out everything we would have said probably is what ended up happening. After the Patriots beat the Bills in Week 18, Mayo fired. There's going to be a coaching search, and the offseason, a very crucial offseason, is underway. So usually we recap the games on this show. Not a ton to talk about from the Bills. I'll take a quick victory lap on Joe Milton. As I said to Matt McCarthy and Phil Perry on Tuesday, why is everybody assuming Joe Milton isn't going to go out there and sling it and maybe win the game? So there you go. But I think more fittingly, we've started this show pretty much all year, Dolph, with how do you feel about the coaching staff? Now that we have kind of our answer on that from ownership, how do you feel about the decision to move on from Mayo?
I thought it was going to happen. I had it first, Barth. December 30th, when I was on with Ty Anderson, I said, my gut feeling is they're going to move on from Mayo. Then Felker comes on and steals my take. But yeah, after that Chargers game, you just said, we didn't get to do the podcast after the Chargers game. I thought that was it for him. Obviously the game on the field was brutal, both sides of the ball. But then you had Mayo after the game. You had Mayo with the weird thing with the running backs. You had the players going after the fans like that. That's not going to go over well with ownership. I think they decided at that point after that Chargers game that they're going to move on. And, maybe in retrospect, the Crafts could have handled that part of it a little better. Maybe they could have dismissed Mayo after the Chargers game, because then Mayo goes out and basically screws them by winning a game. It turns out winning a football game was the final nail in Mayo's coffin here. But yeah, no, it had to be done. It had to be done. Like I was saying to you, off the air and saying to Ty on the air, it just got to a point where this is one of the most embarrassing seasons we've ever seen. And it goes beyond the roster. People keep saying well, what did you expect Mayo to do with this roster? He took a bad roster, a bad situation, and made it worse. I compared this team, the 2024 Patriots, to the Bobby Valentine Red Sox and the Dave Lewis Bruins. Those are the other two teams that I put in this category of not a good team, but the coach/manager comes in and makes it even worse. And what did all three of those guys have in common? One and done. And so it doesn't surprise me at all that they moved on from Mayo. I think it had to happen.
So the coaching search is underway. We'll definitely get to that. This is I want to set the table for us for the offseason as a whole. So obviously the coaching search is what's immediate. It's the first domino to fall. It's what's talked about today. We'll get into that. But I do want to get into a little bit later the roster, like you mentioned, some draft stuff. But as we sit here now, we actually got some news right before we came on. It's part of the reason we were late. Also just technical difficulties. But we now have 3 reported interviews for the Patriots head coaching job. 2 of them, we kind of knew they are the top names available. Mike Vrabel, Detroit Lions offense coordinator Ben Johnson. They're both going to talk to the Patriots this week. Now, if they hire Johnson, we're going to have to wait a while because the new rules about hiring coaches from teams that are still in the playoffs. So the Lions have to bye. That's at least 2 weeks, if not longer. The other interview, and this, for those listening pre-recorded, as we got on, this just broke, and that's actually what you were texting me in time, Matt. According to Mike Jones, who is a national writer for The Athletic, Byron Leftwich will interview with the Patriots today. So Byron Leftwich, a former NFL quarterback, has spent time as a coach, as an offensive coordinator. I believe, I want to double check the timeline, but I'm pretty sure he was the offensive coordinator in Tampa with Tom Brady. He was for a couple of years. He was actually there before Brady and stayed through 2022. So we'll get to Leftwich. Let's start with the big names first, though. Vrabel, Johnson. And let me start. I think they're both qualified, good coaching candidates in a bubble. I think that there's a reason they're the 2 top names available. To me, it comes down, when you talk about for the Patriots specifically, it comes down to philosophy. Is your top priority getting an offensive coach versus a defensive coach? Well, Johnson's the top offensive coach available. Vrabel's the top defensive coach available. Is your priority experience? Vrabel's the top experienced head coach available. Ben Johnson's the top experienced rookie head coach available. So to me, it comes down to that. And I wrote this week, I wrote Sunday night, that I want an experienced head coach for the Patriots. I think It's not that I don't think Ben Johnson's a good coach. I do, but I think Vrabel is too. And a lot of the issues you had with Gerard Mayo when it comes to building a program, when it comes to the culture, when it comes to running the day-to-day operations of a football team, we know Mike Vrabel can do that because he did it at a high level in Tennessee for 6 years. Ben Johnson, wizard on the whiteboard, but can he manage an NFL organization day-to-day? We know that the culture card is filled in spades in Detroit with Dan Campbell, right? Dan Campbell has built that program up, and he is running it. Now, with Vrabel, you have the flip side of who's the offensive coordinator going to be, who's going to take the role of leading Drake May's development and fixing the offense. It's not to say Vrabel doesn't come without his own questions. I would rather Vrabel, and then let's see if he can go get a strong coordinator, which I think he can, as opposed to maybe Ben Johnson. And I think replacing a rookie head coach with another rookie head coach is kind of a risky move.
I'm out on going from one rookie head coach to another. And I'm not convinced that Ben Johnson's going to be a great head coach in the NFL. Like, what evidence do you have of that? Like, that's the risk. That's the risk you take going from a guy who's never done it.
He's Sean McVay. Oh, he's Kevin O'Connell. Well, for every one of those guys, like, how many times did we see Josh McDaniels go and not be able to do it? All throughout Mike McDaniel. And I know people who want to tell me Mike McDaniel's a success. He's 3-15 against teams over 500. His players are begging to get out of there.
He's just okay as a head coach.
Right. We've seen, and on the defensive side too, it's not just offense. Like, we saw that for years in New England, where there were a lot of coaches who were good coaches who went elsewhere, and we know they know football, but they didn't have the leadership quotient needed. They couldn't build a program that you need outside of the bubble of Bill Belichick in order to have success. The one guy who did it, who I wouldn't hate if the Patriots interviewed, and I know that there's some extenuating circumstances here because he's currently suing the NFL, but that's Brian Flores, who got a raw deal in Miami. But Ben Johnson can be the right coach in the right situation, right? So, like, the people who want Ben Johnson will point to Sean McVay, say he was young, he didn't have any experience. Well, he had Wade Phillips as his defensive coordinator to start, a guy who had been a head coach in the NFL for a long time. If you can tell me who Ben Johnson's Wade Phillips is, like, I'm willing to listen. But who is that guy? It's not Lou Anarumo, who I wouldn't hate bringing in as a defensive coordinator. They lost a lot of talent in Cincinnati. He's still a great mind, but he's never been a head coach, right? So I'm with you. I just think that the culture building element of it is too important. We can't just ignore that for, whoop-de-doo trick plays. We're putting the right tackle in motion.
Can I finish my take now?
Sorry, yeah, go ahead. You can't tell I've been thinking a lot about this.
Now, look, I think realistically Ben Johnson is closer to like a Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay than, say, like a Nathaniel Hackett, like a guy that he's not going to fall on his face as a head coach. I just think this is, to your point, the Patriots right now, I think they need to do what they should have done last year before going to Gerard Mayo, was make a safe pick. Like, Mike Vrabel is not going to blow up in their face. Mike Vrabel's not going to be a complete disaster.
I would be shocked.
I'd be stunned if Mike Vrabel came in here, hired a solid staff, guys that he knew around the league, and it just blew up in their face, and it was like just as bad as it was this. That's not going to happen. Like, Mike Vrabel is proven to be a good head coach, a good game manager, good culture builder, and like disciplined. Like, he checks a lot of boxes for what they need at head coach right now. I don't think it's worth the risk of the unknown with Ben Johnson. Like, I think Ben Johnson could be a pretty good head coach. I think he makes sense for the Bears, that I think with their young quarterback, they probably should go in the offensive direction and see what they can do with Ben Johnson, see what he can do in that for his first destination. But I think they're doing the right thing to bring in Ben Johnson and interview him and see what happens. And maybe he wins Robert Kraft over. Robert Kraft has been won over by head coaching candidates in recent years. So we'll see how that goes. I just don't think right now is the right time for them to take that sort of plunge. And like, I get it. Ben Johnson's a forward thinker. His offense is innovative and very exciting to watch. And he's done it with like elite personnel. And so I don't see why people think that he's going to come here and replicate what he's done with the Detroit Lions with the personnel that they have here. Even if they add a left tackle and a wide receiver, it's not going to look the same. And then on top of that, you got the other stuff that we were just talking about, the culture building, managing both sides of the ball, managing the locker room, managing games. Like, Ben Johnson has a lot to prove in that regard. Mike Vrabel has nothing to prove in that regard. I think he's good at all that stuff. And obviously the ties with the Patriots, reports indicate he wants the job.
Yeah.
And so I think it would be wise for the Patriots to go with Mike Vrabel, if not someone with head coaching experience. I think that's the route they have to go.
So I'm actually going to push back on the ties with the Patriots thing, because I think this is important. there's a lot of people screaming, no retreads, no Belichick guys, start over, new page.
He's not a Belichick guy.
He's not. He played here for 8 years. So I'm not going to say he has no connection, but as a coach, his coaching upbringing is almost entirely independent.
Yeah, he's been around.
He was at Ohio State. He was hired by Jim Tressel. He worked for Luke Fickell and Urban Meyer. Then he goes to Houston, where he works for Bill O'Brien. That's as close as he's gotten to the Patriots tree, but it was O'Brien in Houston, which was a different program. He goes to Tennessee. He had Dean Pease as his defensive coordinator. Outside of that, really not any Patriots influence on that coaching staff. There was some in the front office with John Robinson,
right.
But I will be upset if John Robinson follows Mike Vrabel here after he traded A.J. Brown. That's a different conversation.
Yeah, I think those ties are broken.
And then he goes to Cleveland, where he works for Kevin Stefanski, and probably at this point, in terms of his coaching Rolodex, is as connected to Elliott Wolf and that side of things as he is to Bill Belichick. So this is not like another shot at like we need a Belichick clone. This is a guy who has been out on his own, away from the program, away from the culture in New England, and developed it on his own. If he comes here, would there be some of that influence? Probably. The one I look at is he has a relationship with Wes Welker. If you can get Wes Welker to come coach receivers, I think that would be great. Another guy that, yes, has ties here, but is independent as a coach, because at the end of the day, ownership's going to want some sort of familiarity with the candidate. And that, to me, is what makes Vrabel the perfect balance. To something else you said, Vrabel's ability is kind of that overarching guy. We don't know what Elliott Wolf's role is going to be. It sounds like, based on what Robert Kraft said yesterday, he is still going to be here. We can debate whether or not that's the right call. I know people feel very strongly about that, although it is interesting. Phil Perry reported his scouting system was not in place last year, so this will be the first year with it. But it certainly sounded like they're open to, even if Elliott Wolf stays, him losing final say. And I talked about this last year. I don't care who the GM is. I don't care if there's a GM title or not. You can call him whatever you want. President of football operations, director of the football team.
The grand emperor of football.
The football overlord, right. The great football overseer. I don't care. Just tell me who has final say. That person is the face of the franchise for the next 4 months when it comes to building this roster. I don't think you're giving Ben Johnson, a 38-year-old first-time head coach, final roster say. If you hire Ben Johnson, I think Elliott Wolf, unless Ben Johnson brings somebody with him, Elliott Wolf's probably your de facto GM. I would be a little more comfortable giving Mike Vrabel final say. So if they want to give the coach final say and replicate what they had with Belichick, it makes a lot more sense to go with Vrabel. If they're asking the coach to bring in somebody to have final say and work over Elliott Wolf, that's a little bit different.
So you're convinced that Elliott Wolf is just going to stay on and be the de facto GM, and Mike Vrabel's just going to come in and be okay with that?
No. I'm saying that Wolf might still be here, but de facto GM is the final say thing. So he might still be here, have his title. Let's put it this way.
But you can, because he's the executive vice president of player personnel, you can hire a president of football,
right,
GM,
or something. Yeah.
So he has the title.
Let me put it this way. 6 people in the draft room, right? Clock's ticking. 3 people want Will Campbell. 3 people want Abdul Carter. Who has the power to stand up and say, my vote counts as 2. I'm in charge here. We're taking my guy, right? Negotiating contract with a free agent. Half the room wants to offer him X amount of money. Half the room wants to offer him X amount of money plus 10. Who gets to say, nope, this is what we're offering. It's my call. I have final say over the roster. I don't care if that person's called GM or whatever. Elliott Wolf was that guy last year. He had that's what final say means. Elliott Wolf had that last year. Elliott Wolf could stay, but not have that final say power. Like, at this point, it seems like he's staying. For better or worse, it seems like he's staying. If he's staying without final say, that does change things. But then who has it? Is it the head coach? Is it somebody the head coach brings in? That's basically the question that is going to linger until they hire somebody and we find out. So if he stays with final say, that would be puzzling to me. At this point, I think he's staying. So it's just a matter of if is he staying to run the show, or is he staying because his team did a bunch of the legwork on this draft throughout the season and he's going to help the new real de facto GM kind of get going, and then they part ways in May, as is often the case with front office personnel.
I think that last thing you said is more likely.
Their season's May to May. Like, that's what they do. So I know this is Felger's take about turning the lights on and off, and people roll their eyes at that.
They can't just have an empty building, right? They can't just get rid of everybody on day one after the season. I think the firing Gerard Mayo was the signal that you're all on notice. The seat's extremely hot on a lot of you. This is the big move that we have to make right now, just to send a message and be decisive and all that. Doesn't mean everybody else is safe or that everybody else is staying.
Boy, were they. We didn't really talk about this. To fire him like an hour after the game ended.
Right. I was literally about to text you like, okay, I'll get the draft going.
Just
we were
in case he's during
fired.
the day. Like, let's have this draft. Like, talk about sending a message that like, this was not good enough. We are making changes. I don't think and I was talking to some people who've covered the team longer than me. Like after the game like that, Monday morning's one thing. Monday morning's pretty swift and quick. After the game, wow.
Yeah. I remember I think the Packers fired Mike McCarthy on a Sunday.
Oh, yes.
We were in the press box and we were like,
but I don't think that was the last day of the season. That was mid-season.
No,
right?
It was mid-season. Yeah.
So that's a little different. I'm talking about like, you can't even wait to Black Monday.
Right. It was Black Sunday. Yeah.
Or whatever it is. So, anyway, so those Vrabel, Johnson seem like the two leading candidates. I think it's going to come down to what do they want more? What do they value more? An offensive coach to grow with Drake May or an experienced coach to grow the program overall? I would go experience. If you're somebody arguing offense, it's a valid argument. I'm not saying you're wrong.
I think that's misguided though, to just say we need an offensive coach. You know what I mean? I feel like their problems go beyond just needing an offensive coach.
Well, here's the thing. If we're sitting here saying offensive, we want Vrabel, we want the experience, we'd better have a damn good answer for who the offensive coordinator is going to be. There's been some rumors that Josh McDaniels would come with Vrabel. I wonder if he'd call Bill O'Brien at BC and get him back. Maybe one of the guys he worked with in Tennessee. Tommy Reese, I think he has some familiarity with, who's been in Cleveland.
What about Arthur Smith? Is he not able to
fired?
Does he have to get fired? They can't poach him
for a lateral move.
I don't know. Give him a raise.
That'd be a tough stuff. I would say maybe Alex Van Pelt, but like we have to have a good answer for the OC. I would say if you're the Ben Johnson people or the we want an offensive coach people, you need to tell me who are both coordinators, especially on defense, and is there like Ben McAdoo held this role this year. Ben McAdoo is not nearly good enough at this. Who is the veteran voice in the room? Who is the guy that is going to help with the day-to-day running of an NFL organization that Ben Johnson hasn't had to deal with because he's been nose deep in that whiteboard? That's what it's going to come down to. So the other guy they interviewed, and he could maybe be part of the answer here, is Byron Leftwich, who I mentioned earlier, was a quarterback in the league for like 10 years. He was in Jacksonville, had a couple good seasons in Jacksonville, was with the Cardinals for a little bit, was the Buccaneers offense coordinator from 2019 to 2022.
Are there Vrabel connections there?
Had mixed results there. So not on the tree, but we know Vrabel and Tom Brady are very close.
Yeah.
And Leftwich was Brady's OC in Tampa.
If he's good enough for Tom Brady.
Right. Now, again, it was mixed results. And you also had Bruce Arians there kind of steering the ship.
You also had Tom Brady.
Right. But if Brady liked him, I could absolutely see him going to Vrabel and being like, hey, and going to I don't know if he can, maybe not though, because he owns the Raiders now. I keep forgetting about that.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that works.
Well, look, they need to bring in a guy who's with a track record of developing quarterback. If they're going to move on from Alex Van Pelt and they're going to pull the rug out from under Drake May like that, like they need to stay on the right track with his development. And like, I know because they're probably going to switch up the system on him unless they want to bring in another West Coast guy, and Vrabel's okay with that.
Right. It's a different version of what it was in Cleveland, but it's what Vrabel's teams ran in Tennessee with Arthur Smith and LaFleur. Like it's related. It abuts up to it. There's not, if Vrabel tries to find somebody who was running the offense he was running in Tennessee, it's going to be an adjustment, but it's not going to be it'd be akin to the adjustment you might make year to year to when you get new players and things like that. I don't think it wouldn't be like going McDaniels where you're tearing the whole thing down, starting from scratch, new language, new base concepts, all of that. If Vrabel keeps running his offense in Tennessee, because he didn't run the Patriots offense in Tennessee, again, I can't stress this enough. He is not a Patriots coaching, Belichick coaching tree, or whatever.
That's probably why he's good.
Maybe. Like Vrabel might end up running the same offense depending on who he hires.
Yeah, no, like whatever is his plan, I'm okay with. It's just I just don't want to have too much new for Drake May going into year 2. We've just seen how that can. We saw it with Mac Jones, but like, not that Mac Jones was going to be destined for greatness and then they ruined him, but like, I think we've seen around the league how you can sort of ruin a quarterback by, switching things up on him too much. And I feel like Drake May is still developing, and he's still not really a finished product, not really close to that. And so I would like to maintain some of the development that they've had, however they can. That's why I wouldn't be crazy about Josh McDaniels. I feel like he could be good for Drake May to develop him into something, but you're starting over, like you said. I feel like you're going to start over from the ground up if you bring in Josh McDaniels as the new OC. And so anything that they could really like carry over from year 1 to year 2 with Drake May, I'd be okay with.
We do have another interview here just coming in. This is according to Tom Pelissero. Yep. The Patriots are interviewing Pep Hamilton for their head coaching job. So long time NFL head coach, big time quarterback guy. He was Justin Herbert's quarterback's coach as a rookie.
He was a longtime head coach?
No, a long time. He was a head coach once, and that was in the XFL.
You said longtime NFL head coach.
Longtime NFL coach. Sorry.
He was here for a long time,
quarterback
right?
coach.
That's a Belichick
No,
guy,
you're thinking
right?
of Pepper Johnson.
Pepper Johnson, that's what I'm thinking
so
of.
Pep Hamilton, I'll give you the resume here. He was the quarterback's coach and offensive coordinator at Howard in the late 90s, was a QC coach with the Jets, quarterback's coach, receivers coach, went to the Niners, was a quarterback's coach there, went to the Bears, late 2000s now, was a receivers coach at Stanford, was the OC at Stanford, I think with Andrew Luck, 2011 to 2012, right? Was the Colts offensive coordinator from 2013 to 15, was an assistant head coach and quarterback's coach for the Browns, went to Michigan in 2017 and 18, goes to the XFL. Justin Herbert's quarterback's coach his rookie year, pass game coordinator and quarterback's coach for the Texans in 21, was the OC for the Texans in 2022. So the year before they got CJ Stroud, and he was out of the league last year doing independent quarterback coaching, including working with Joe Milton. So that's a really quick rundown.
So he could be a guy that works with May. I don't know what the system would be like, but quarterback coach maybe.
Yeah, that system is more. I don't even know what that system is. Quarterbacks coach, maybe an offense coordinator candidate.
But I'm saying he could keep the footwork at the level that he's gotten it to and things like that.
Yeah. So there's another name for you. Also with that, so now I hate the way this rule works. Doesn't work well. But the team is Rooney Rule compliant now.
Yeah, that's their 2 Rooney Rule guys.
Right.
That's just the reality. That's the reality of the league. But at least they're experienced guys, and I'd be okay if they bring them in some capacity.
They're both, and we kind of did this last year, right? I don't know that either one of them. And we talked about now want to have a first-time head coach, and got both guys who've been out of the league to being head coach. But elsewhere on the staff, they make sense. Pep Hamilton, very experienced, been around quarterbacks for a long time. Byron Leftwich, former player. I wouldn't be surprised if we hear their names again at some point, right?
Right.
So there you go. Those are the coaching interviews. Any other thoughts on the coaching staff here? I wanted to do, but we did about half an hour on that.
I mean, we're early in the process, but I'm a little surprised we haven't heard about Flores yet. Here.
So that's the other one. I would love Brian Flores. I think so remember when he left, everybody at the time when he left, the take was, they let the next guy get away. Now people were talking about Jimmy Garoppolo when they said that. I remember saying at the time, the next guy did just leave, but it's not Jimmy, it's Flores. I'm a huge fan of his. I think he got such a raw. Do we swear on this? I forget.
What?
I want to drop a rare swear on this.
Just swear. Who cares?
He got a shit deal in Miami.
Oh my God! You said
shit. The owner wanting him to lose and yada yada blah 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 whatever, right? And ever since he went to Minnesota, Minnesota's been one of the best defensive teams in the league for 2 years.
Yeah, I think Flores was a big role in that Super Bowl that they won against the Rams with that defense.
We know he can build a culture. We know the players like him. He does kind of have a history of being an a-hole to young quarterbacks, but
it's very Belichickian.
One, you hope he learned his lesson. Two, if you were to get Flores, the next obvious move to me is Josh McCown as your offensive coordinator. Josh McCown is the quarterback's coach in Minnesota. You look at the way they've revived quarterbacks' careers there. He's done a great job. And McCown coached Drake May in high school. So Drake May should never have to talk to Brian Flores, right? That's all going to run through McCown. And look, people say, well, McCown's going to be gone in a year or two, and that's why you hire an offensive coach. If the coach builds a good program, Bill did this here for years. And the fact that they kind of stopped doing it is a big part of what hurt him. If you build a strong program, you have the next guy in place. Whoever you hire as the quarterback's coach under McCown, or the pass game coordinator, or maybe it's the line coach, the tight ends coach, whatever, right? You identify a guy, and I think they did this year with T.C. McCartney. You identify a guy that is going to be the next man up. So you get a year or two with Josh McCown. Fine, he gets hired away. You have the next guy ready. You keep him. You promote him. He gets 2 years. He's gone. Ideally, you keep the pipeline going. But if not, I'm sorry, Drake May's been in the NFL 6 years now. I'm not super worried about an offensive coordinator changing, totally throwing him off. And the reality is you're going to get all the best offensive coordinator candidates who want to come work with him. So I love the setup. I love the setup with Flores. I think he's a good coach. I think McCown would be fascinating to bring along. You probably get like Patrick Graham, somebody like that, to come help run the defense. The only thing is there is that looming lawsuit. And if any owner can kind of pull something like that off in the face of the league, I feel like Robert Kraft probably has the standing to do it. But that, I think it's part of the reason he didn't get a head coaching job last year. Like, it is a factor.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, maybe he just stays in Minnesota after he goes through this interview cycle. But I just feel like the fact that he's already getting interviews tells me that is he Flores? I thought he was getting interviews with the Bears, maybe the Jaguars too. I thought they were setting up interviews with him.
Did they? It's very possible I missed it.
There was a whirlwind of, like interview requests and setups yesterday. I could have been misreading that, but I thought Flores was getting some kind of interview somewhere. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't head coach. I haven't seen that,
but Kevin Seifert of ESPN, I think today's 7th, right? Yeah. So this is like not that long ago. Brian Flores is gracefully taking a lot of questions about his head coaching prospects. He said he will take every interview that is requested. Asked if he's interested in the Patriots job, he said, I would say yes, but added, it's not up to me if they want to talk. So Flores is interested. Oh, he hasn't gotten interviews because they're in the playoffs. They can't request to interview him. They changed the rules now. That's why.
I thought I saw something about, maybe
teams
they
can be interested. You probably saw teams were interested.
Someone's interested.
So
yeah.
He can't start interviewing until the Vikings are eliminated.
Out, yeah. Which could be this weekend against the Rams. You never know.
My short list coming in was Vrabel, Flores, Ben Johnson, Brian Daboll.
Sure.
Now, Daboll obviously is staying. He bridges it perfectly. There's your experienced head coach on the offensive side of the ball.
Right.
He would have been great. He might have ended up being my number one choice, but he's not there. Vrabel, Flores, Ben Johnson. To me, it's got to be one of those three.
So here's the thing. Like, I think they still need to focus on Drake May's development. So, like, bring in a developmental or like an OC quarterbacks coach they can specialize in developing Drake May. Yeah. And then, Vrabel, who knows? I don't know that he's going to be the head coach for 20 years when they get him. Maybe he doesn't quite work out like something, it never ends well with any head coach. But, several years down the road, they've established their culture. They've rebuilt the roster. Drake May's a finished product. Now go out and get your offensive head coach. 5-6 years down the road, called Mike Vrabel doesn't quite work out the way they want him to. But Drake May is a finished product. They have the offense in place. They have the quarterback. Now you go out and get the next Ben Johnson or the next Josh McCown. Like, these guys keep coming around. It's not like Ben Johnson's like this generational. No, you have to get Ben Johnson because there's never going to be another good head coaching candidate who's on the offensive side of the ball. I feel like that can be sort of next man up after bringing in a more experienced guy. So I think that's a good plan. If they could do something like the setup you're saying, with Josh McCown coming in as the offensive coordinator. I like the idea of a quarterbacks coach who's had success with the developing quarterbacks, bring him in. He gets the promotion to offensive coordinator. I like that sort of setup.
And again, McCown's intriguing because he has worked with Drake May specifically. So you have that. Any other thoughts on the coaching staff? We might get more news here as we go.
Yeah, we haven't talked about, I think they need a new wide receivers coach. You mentioned pass game coordinator. I feel like, the route spacing and things like that have been issues for a few years now. I feel like they could add to the coaching staff in that regard. And I don't know any names that they could bring in for a wide receivers coach. The only name I thought of was Chad O'Shea, who was here before. And I thought he did a good job as a wide receivers coach. He's a former offensive coordinator. I don't know exactly what he's doing right now, but they need to bring in an experienced wide receivers coach. And I wouldn't mind someone who can specifically focus on coordinating the pass game just to get everyone on the same page.
So I'll give you a couple. Chad O'Shea, it was in Cleveland with Mike Vrabel this year, and he was the wide receivers coach and pass game coordinator. Wes Welker, I mentioned him before. He's in Miami. He was in San Francisco. He's done a good job. If the Jets make changes, and two of these guys they interviewed last year, if the Jets make changes, then Sean Jefferson, who they interviewed, right? If that staff gets he's done a very good job. Keenan McCardell in Minnesota. If you get Flores, maybe he gets McCardell to come with him, who Calvin Johnson, which one of them was? It was one of those guys. Calvin Johnson said was the best coach he's ever had. I'll give you one more. I bring this guy up every year. I don't think anybody really knows who he is, but I am a fan of his. His name's Holman Wiggins.
You're making up, Nate. You're trying to catch me.
So
now.
he's bounced around as a wide receivers coach. He was at Alabama for a couple of years under Saban, and at one point was the assistant head coach. And a few years ago when Alabama was having some staff turnover, I was kind of they have all these great wide receivers, and the Patriots were doing turnover too. And I was like, is there anybody from Alabama they could poach? I'm like, well, their wide receivers coach is probably good. And I remember talking to somebody down there who was like, no, that's the one guy Saban's not going to let go. And they had superstar coaches on their staff at the time. And they're like, no, like that's Saban's guy. He's not going to let him go. Now, when Saban left, he left and went to Texas A&M, where he was this year as the co-offensive coordinator and wide receivers coach. Is he ready to be an NFL OC? I don't know. Would I take him as a wide receivers coach? Yeah. So that's just a name to know. Holman Wiggins.
Okay. Well, I hope they make an inspired choice there for wide receivers coach. And if they could add a pass game coordinator, that would show that they're at least starting to think forward and then sort of modernize the way that they're structured.
Some of that is going to come down to who the head coach is. If you hire Ben Johnson, like he was a pass game coordinator, he's probably going to want to do that stuff himself.
Yeah,
right?
It's the Ben Johnson show.
If it's Mike Vrabel, you want to beef up the staff. So when we'll maybe once I have the head coach, we'll do another episode and and we'll get to the staffing stuff. I do want to talk a little more offseason though here. Roster and acknowledging that we kind of need to know who the coach is, who has final say to get into specifics. But every year it feels like we have a big three positions. It's like you guys do on
Sports Hub Underground, big three, little crossover.
Your big three needs, the three positions you want to see them spend primary assets on, premium assets on this offseason.
Okay. So my big three, I don't know if it's necessarily in this order.
Doesn't have to be in order.
But left tackle.
Agree.
Wide receiver.
Agree.
And call it defensive line. You know, I always say defensive line.
Can I say pass rusher?
Pass
would
rusher.
You count a defensive tackle?
I mean, they needed like a run stuffing defensive tackle too, but edge rusher, defensive end like that.
With you 100%.
Yeah.
Those are the big three. Corner is a strong fourth, but I think there's a gap. Whole front seven, linebacker, defensive lineman, that's up there. Tight end's a sneaky need. I don't think they need a backup quarterback anymore. I think they found theirs. I would trade Joe Milton for a top 100 pick. Short of that, I'm keeping him as the backup. Maybe he gets another showcase game next year and you can trade him for more. But wide receiver, I'll give him an order. Tackle, wide pass rusher, tackle, wide receiver, pass rusher. I'd go in that. Now, doesn't mean they need to add them in that order, but that's the order of importance.
I put left. I say specifically left tackle because they haven't really invested in that particular spot. It's the most important spot on your offensive line, your blindside protector. You have to have at least a decent left tackle. And I feel like they could get by with just a decent offensive line across the board, but they got to get a good established left tackle or, spend the fourth pick first round pick on a left tackle.
Well, that's when I say premium asset, I'm talking
premium asset,
draft pick, something like that.
Mix of both. I think right tackle, they can sign a veteran and they can, see if Caden Wallace can develop into that guy. I'm not out on Caden Wallace.
He's still an unknown. He didn't play enough, and that's on the coaching staff. He should have played more. A year where you talked about this is about development and finding what we have. Caden Wallace should have been playing more.
Right.
Not just after the injury. At the beginning of the year, he should have been playing more. But
he's an unknown, but he's a right tackle, right? So they need to invest at left tackle.
If you have him and you can find the Vidarian Lowe equivalent of a right tackle in free agency, not Vidarian Lowe, he's not a good right tackle, but that equivalent, you go into the year, it's a multi-year thing. If one of those guys isn't your starting right tackle, we'll revisit again next year. But they need a blindside protector for Drake May. They've been year to year on that for too long. The only thing about getting that guy in the veteran market is I don't know that you're going to have an option. Cam Robinson's probably your best bet, and he'd work-ish. Ronnie Stanley's going back to Baltimore. I would be shocked if they let him go. The next best guy available might be Trent Brown again. So
been on that road.
Right. So no, they need to invest in that. And I do think they need to invest in that in the draft. Am I as locked in as they need to get that guy at the very top of the draft? Not as much as maybe I was in September. Guys like Josh Connerly, guys like Ariante Ursary, I think are still in play. I'm not as big on Josh Simmons. I know people like him, and he does have the upside. I really don't want them no half measures at the position. People say, well, Josh Simmons is like a top 10 caliber pick, and you can get him later. Why can you get him later? Because he just tore his ACL, and we don't know how bad, or I use as a placeholder. It was reported as a bad knee injury. I hear that. I think ACL. We'll see what the details on it actually are. The combine will be important. I don't need them drafting like Dominique Easley at left tackle, right? Like
Jesus Christ.
Because he was like a very talented player, but he had knee quite, and it was worse than what Simmons has, but it just feels like a half measure to me. Because what if he's not ready to start the season? Well, now you need to sign a bridge guy. Well, if you're signing a bridge guy, why not just wait till next year and draft a left tackle high, right? Something like that. So, but I do think there are late round 1, early round 2 guys you can get. I do think though here, because I want to touch on the draft before we wrap it up. Trenches.
Absolutely. Yep.
The wide receiver. So everything I just said about tackle, it has to be the draft. It shouldn't be a veteran. I feel the complete opposite about wide receiver. Even if they do get a new wide receivers coach, I've just seen them blow it too many times. Go get a guy who's proven, steps on the field, day one of minicamp. Day one of minicamp, not on the field at OTAs, because these great wide receivers don't do OTAs, right? Day one of minicamp, a guy that steps on the field and instantly makes a difference. DK Metcalf, T. Higgins, if he becomes available, which I don't think he will. But, trading for a guy like DK Metcalf, something like that, and then you get to the draft, trenches, both sides, edge rusher, defensive tackle, offensive tackle. That's what I want to see them address high in the draft.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think I'm going to be writing about that on 985thesportshub.com either later this week, next week, somewhere in that range. They need to beef up both lines. They need to beef up both, the trenches, like you said, whether it's pass rush, even run defense too. I think like interior pass rusher, they don't need to invest a ton there, especially assuming Barmore comes back at 100%. They still have, Jeremiah Farms is a decent pass rusher. I hope they keep Daniel Ekuale around.
Yes, give us the Daniel Ekuale take. That's your big take of the offseason.
Yeah, it's my big overall. That's my big picture take for the offseason. They got to re-sign Daniel Ekuale because I thought he was okay when he was put in a position to succeed. I thought, he wasn't in position to succeed when they asked him to stop the run.
Yeah.
He's a pass rusher. He's a situational inside pass rusher, but he played the right way. He played hard. He didn't give into this culture that they sort of fostered where like there's finger pointing, blaming the fans, blaming someone else. But he's the guy that came out whenever he spoke. He said, guys need to check their ego at the door. Guys are playing selfishly. Team guy. So like, I would like it if they kept him around, but like, I think that's a good stable of interior pass rushers, assuming you have Barmore back and he's sort of the anchor of that. But they need an edge pass rusher. They need interior run stoppers. I think Devon Gottschall's fine, but he can't really be like your cornerstone guy, like making it all work by himself. I think they need to beef that up. They need guys that can set the edge. I feel like, coaching was an issue there, but they need guys that can set the edge. They still have Keon White. He could still be an interior pass rusher too. He's not like a pure edge rusher guy. So they need edge pass rushing help. They need interior run stopping across the line. And then obviously offensive line, like they need a left tackle. I think they can figure out most of the other spots, honestly. Like I'm not saying they have to half-ass it there, but I just think my take is they don't need all pros on the offensive line. I think especially if Drake May takes a step forward and he can turn into an elite guy, especially with his mobility. I think you can get by with just a decent offensive line, which goes to your take about the wide receivers. I think I've said before, you can get by with just good wide receivers. You can't get by with average wide receivers, which I think right now at best they have an average group. They have a bunch of number 3s and 4s. They need to get, a number 1 and a pretty good number 2. And so if they can go out and sign T. Higgins and they can sign a guy like, say, Amari Cooper, who's a free agent, just throwing him out there. Like if they can beef up the top of the wide receiver depth chart and then shore up left tackle, and then fill in the rest of the offensive line with, decent guys, a decent amount of investment, better than what they did last year. I think they're cooking. I think they'll be cooking. I know that's a lot to ask, but that's what's on the table.
There's a lot that needs to be done. Like it's fair to ask a lot because that's kind of the position they're in. I was just checking. No more coaching updates for the Patriots as of right now. So let's wrap this up before we have to go down a whole other rabbit hole. If you want to check out more of these shows, you want to stay tuned, you can check out the Sports Hub YouTube page. We actually have a specific podcast feed on the YouTube page for this show if you want to subscribe to that specifically.
Excellent.
Also, the Patriots audio feed, Sports Hub Patriots audio feed, wherever you get your podcast. And we'll have more coverage on 98.5thesportshub.com. So we'll probably do another show once the coach is hired, I think, and we get some more answers. It's not going to be weekly during the offseason. It will kind of be as news comes, right, as we've done in the past. So that, it's all subject to change. But I would say the next episode I would expect once we know the head coaches, and we'll come back and react to that. So until then, for Matt Dolloff, I'm Alex Barth. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time.